I want to call this meeting to order,
You did not.
and we need to amend the agenda. We've had a request to move an item from the consent agenda to the action agenda, and that item is, which item?
It's the insurance.
It's the insurance, Madam Chair,
Liability insurance.
So that's one change. The second change is to add to the action agenda North Buncombe Middle School's Duke Energy easement, and that is so they can construct that road around that school that they've been trying to do for about 4 years. So could I get a motion to approve?
Madam Chair, could I offer I don't know that it matters because they're not numbered. Would it behoove us to, in terms of the action agenda, I think in terms of timing and time, it might be best if the interim budget resolution for 2018-19 is the last of those items to be taken up versus the first.
All right, we can, in my opinion, we can let poor old Deborah Frisbee sit on pins and needles for a little bit longer, and we can move that, if there is not an objection, we can move that to the last item in the action agenda.
I think we may spend some time there, and it just,
Do you have a premonition? Okay, so with those changes, I would entertain a motion to approve the amended agenda.
so move.
Thank you. Could I get a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We have approved the agenda with the amended agenda. The first item on the action agenda then has become the budget amendment number 9, which is a walk-in document, and you have that document to the left of your placemat. And that's dated June the 28th, 2018, if I'm correct.
Or would you like a motion to approve this before we begin discussion?
That would be nice.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Could I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Have we got a little discussion?
Yeah, is there discussion before we vote? Once we vote, we're not discussing.
I kind of like talking about it after we're finished.
Ms. Frisbee's come up, she may want
Do
to.
we have,
I thought I'd just come on up.
are there questions from the board concerning this item, this walk-in document, budget amendment number 9? I believe Mr. Bryant might have some.
No, I don't. I just,
You just wanted to make
we
sure I
do,
do it
and
Well,
right.
I go
I
sit
don't.
down.
I do not, no.
Okay, any other board members have questions about this document? Then, if Mr. Bryant's okay, I believe, do I have a motion and a second?
Yeah.
Could I get a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good.
Apologies, Madam Chair, I jumped the
That's
gun.
all right. I need a keeper, Lord knows, today especially. All right, now we are on the next item in the action agenda, which is the appointment to the School Capital Fund Commission. And I believe I would open the floor for nominations for an appointment.
I nominate Pat Bryant to continue in that capacity.
Are there any other nominations?
Madam Chair, respectfully, I will decline that nomination.
Respectfully, I don't think we're going to accept that.
Takes a lot of time. In 2 years, I'm happy to help the next person, but I think it's time for someone else.
All right, then.
All right. Do we have another nomination?
At the risk of being smacked, I'd like to nominate Max Queen.
Do you think he has problems over there?
Just scooting over.
Max, you might have to curtail your vacations.
I How soon does this decision have to be made?
They've already called for it.
Oh, they've already called.
The meeting's July 12th. And it's designed to be the July 12th meeting is designed to be kind of a anticipation of new people, informative, not business-related, but a meeting to kind of bring the new folks up to speed, whoever they are that are going to be a part of that commission. I don't know what the county commission has done with their two. I'm not sure who's representing Asheville City. I know that Gene Bell, who was the fifth member appointed by the four that are set out in statute, had indicated that he was not going to serve again. So I think that's one of the first things the other four are going to have to do is at least discuss getting nominations for who the fifth member will be. But it's not designed to be, there'd be no presentations from either of the school systems at the July meeting. That's not supposed to kick in that process until September or October.
It's sort of, it's surprised that Pat has chosen to decline. You're doing a great job, Pat. And the other, and then what comes to mind is with this being an election year, to become established in that role, I'm wondering if it would be more prudent to pick someone who would not be eligible for election this year, because you never know.
But, Madam Chair, our person does not have to be a school board member, is that correct?
That is correct.
So if
Just has to be appointed by this group.
has to be somebody who knows something about
I see.
capital projects and understands the school system, so.
I see.
So-
Are there other nominations? Pat, if you're sure that's your decision,
I've thought about it. It is.
I would be willing to accept the role. But
Okay, are there other nominations from the board? Hearing none, can we accept that nomination by acclamation? Is that okay? Well, how do you like that? Okay, would the board like to accept Max Queen's nomination by acclamation?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Are we okay down there? And Amy doesn't have any bruises on her or anything?
not yet.
At this juncture. All right, then Kim will fill in the blanks with Max Queen's name. Thank you. Thanks, Max. Yeah, yes. Now we are on the item to award the contract for liability, property, auto, and workers' compensation insurance. And are there board members that have questions about that?
I have just one, but do you need a motion for approval first? Or
Do I?
For discussion first?
I keep thinking I've got to call Tiffany's names where I am with that. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, and do I need a second?
Second.
Thank you. Now then, Tiffany, it's your turn.
It's my turn.
So I had one question. Recommendation number 3. The premium cost has dropped by 6.5%, even as total payrolls were increased by 13%. It must have been something that you did or someone in the department did. How did that come to happen?
So a couple of weeks ago, the agent with Surrey came to meet with Ms. Frisbee and I to specifically go over workers' compensation because our workers' compensation has been high for the past few years. And he presented Liberty Insurance, but we decided not to go with Liberty because we felt like that was just going to be a lower amount just for 1 year. We wanted to stick with EMC Insurance because we like what they're doing. We've been with them for the past couple of years. They have wonderful customer service. And this upcoming year, they would like to work with us on our risk management and work with the risk management team here in order to try to keep everything down, specifically the workers' comp.
So would it be fair to say then that as a general course of what you do as you go through these processes, you're always looking to try to save us money.
Correct.
Thank you. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Any other questions from board members?
I guess, and with that, saying saving money, I mean, the last statement here under the recommendation of 3 is that, even though, it sounds to me like even though we are getting a few more items, it's actually, the premium is less than what we spent last year. Is that correct?
That's
Yeah.
correct. Yeah.
Could you explain what coverage that we have with the assault active shooter coverage? What exactly is that?
That is for anything like unfortunately, with what we've seen within this past school year and around the country. That is the coverage specifically for that. So we would get, so if in the unfortunate event anything like that were to happen here at Buncombe County Schools, we would get assistance from EMC and also any of their third-party providers as it relates to any type of meals that need to be provided, any type of other assistance that need to come in as far as just counseling, anything along those lines. So they just come in and they help us. They actually help our team.
So if such an occurrence were to happen, and we needed additional counselors from other districts or other parts of the state or whatever, that coverage would basically reimburse us the cost of that to then turn around and,
Correct.
okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions from board members? Hearing none, I have a motion to approve in a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes. Now we are at the North Buncombe Middle School Duke Energy easement. It was a walk-in. Mr. Fearley's here. You have a copy of that to the left of your place.
Do we?
Is that wrong? I'd seen him back there. Lord, okay. Are there questions from the board about this item? We're all going to be so happy to put this one to rest, Mr. Fearley. And we appreciate your work, so I I don't know where I am. Do I have a motion to approve? Do I already have it? All those in favor?
I don't think we did do a motion. No. Oh, sorry. Madam Chair, I move that we approve this easement.
Thank you, and
I'll second, Madam Chair.
thank you. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's why we don't have 2 board meetings a month. Okay, now we are ready for Ms. Frisbee. I hope you ate your Wheaties this morning. And we have the interim budget resolution for 2018-19. Ms. Frisbee's come to the podium. Could I get a motion to approve? For this one? No.
Was it budget amendment?
Do I need a motion to approve in a second before we discuss, or do we take questions first?
Either way's fine, but you can go ahead and do a motion.
I'd like to do a motion to approve
So moved.
in a second.
Second.
Now we can discuss. Thank you very much. And are there board members that have questions for Ms. Frisbee concerning this interim budget?
I have a lot, but I can wait if others have questions.
Do other board members have questions? Then we'll let Mr. Bryant go first, and should you have a question, we'll cue him and he can hold up and we can go from there.
Or we can wait till he's done, and then we can ask her.
Yeah, well, we might be eating fried chicken at dinner is what we might be.
So, yeah. So my first question, and I'm not sure whether it goes to Ms. Frisbee or to Dr. Baldwin, but either can answer that. Our requested allocation was reduced. It appears to me that they placed 2 different funds at 2 different times in the fund balance. First one was $518,802. Did we ever receive any information from the commissioners and/or from the manager as to why that was done?
I did not.
You did not?
I did not.
That was the piece about behavioral health, wasn't it?
No, I think that was relative to the fund balance adjustment that was done at the beginning, which was, I think, certainly a different precedent than we've been accustomed to. And that was part of what was presented in Manager Stone's presentation to the commissioners that I think, Mr. Bryant, you and I had attended, and that was part of that PowerPoint. It was an adjustment to address their policy similar to ours regarding fund balance level. But you are correct in that there was a second component to that.
Right.
That placed $1,569,409 in the fund balance after the initial allotment of $1.1 million.
Sir, is that the commissioner's fund balance and not ours?
That's exactly correct. That's the county fund balance.
Yeah, and so to tie in with that, can you give us, as best you can, where we stand with our current fund balance as we close the year out today? Or is it too early to give us that? Maybe August is better once you've begun the year end.
Give you a preliminary number, but it is not going to be the final number.
Give me a preliminary number.
So we appropriated $4.1 million in our 17-18 budget to balance the local budget. And as of today, we expect to use $3.6 million of that 4.1.
4.1.
1 million. And we expect to use 3.6 million.
So we're decreasing our fund balance then by that amount of 4.1 minus 3.6, which,
We're using 3.6.
Using 3.6.
Of the 4.1.
of the 4.1 that we, okay.
Yes,
So we're
ma'am.
decreasing it by 3.6.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And here's what I'm feeling like, and this is maybe more of a board discussion than with Ms. Frisbee or Dr. Baldwin, but I'm feeling that this goes back to a fundamental misunderstanding, lack of communication. I don't know what the word is, but I get the feeling that the county of Buncombe has, from somewhere, begun to distrust this board to do its job and to manage the monies that are appropriated to us, and that as long as we have a fund balance that we have tried to explain to them, and I'm not advocating that we shouldn't have one, but the fact that we have one, because I don't see these things happening in other departments. I've looked through their budget. One of the things with being transparent is you can go online and look at the county's budget, and I don't see other departments with money pulled in May at the first presentation of the budget, and then with monies $1,569,409, $1.5 million pulled the night of the vote and placed into their fund balance for us to come ask for. So I think we've got an issue here that we as a board with them need to work through. My fear is this. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Baldwin, but have we heard from the county yet on what the procedural operational function is going to be for us to request $1.5 million that they tell us we have, but that has been placed into their fund balance? Do we have any information from the county today?
No.
Have you heard anything?
No, sir.
I'm having a hard time getting my hands around trying to vote on an interim budget that I think, someone help me, but we've got 700 plus employees that are paid from local funds,
That's correct.
ranging from people in the central office, I think, to probably teacher assistants and everything in between, running the gamut.
It's all different types of personnel, certified.
And we're going to
non-certified.
vote on a budget without a process in place from the county on how we're going to encumber those funds to pay those people. I might as well vote on somebody printing me some money out in the parking lot in the back of their car. Now, that's facetious and that's an exaggeration, but if something happens between now and August 15th, September the 15th, October the 1st, pick a date, we don't have a guarantee, and I would ask Mr. Shatley to chime in. Do we have a guarantee from a legal perspective that that money is coming our way? That has been placed into fund balance?
Other than the county's commitment, no. I mean, there's a legal obligation there for them not to reduce your appropriation, which they've not done, from the year to year. And so ultimately, there is no obligation for them to increase it either. So technically, what they have done is legal, and they can ask you to come back and if you need that, I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but can ask you to request that money.
And so, since all that money is tied into salaries and benefits, how do we, from a board's perspective, how do we tell 700-plus employees that what the state has voted to the other 3,300 employees in terms of raises and appropriate benefits, et cetera, how do we guarantee to them that they're going to receive the raises and the money that they are entitled to as employees of Buncombe County Schools that match up with their counterparts doing the same work that are paid from state funds? How do we do that?
And I'll certainly let Ms. Frisbee also kind of answer this to where I can answer, but part of it is just a cash flow issue as well. I mean, I don't think you necessarily have to tell folks that they're not going to get their raises. And the county also didn't put any stipulation on when you can come request that money too. Right. So I don't know how necessarily the board wants to handle that, but certainly the administration could request that money on a monthly basis, or could flow those funds through its own fund balance or the use of other funds and attempt to request it at the end of the year.
And what if they told us no?
Well, I think that's ultimately an issue that we've got to figure out because they've budgeted to you and just said all you have to do is ask for it. Basically, I think if the county's not going to give it to you, then they need to be upfront and tell you that they're not going to give it to you when you request it. I think we would obviously need to know that now because it does, I mean, I think your point is valid. It puts you in a situation to where you have got to adopt, or at least in a few weeks, have got to adopt your formal budget instead of an intermediary budget. But I think those are things that you have ultimately got to think about.
Madam Chair, I'd like to chime in at this moment because, Mr. Shatley, I was at that county commissioner meeting, and I don't recall them saying all we had to do was ask for it. What I heard was that we would come to them with a formal presentation, and to me, that leaves it up to how they're feeling that night, who might have some personal vendettas against the school system, who may be feeling generous that evening, what their fund balance might be looking like now that they've given that tax cut. I'm just going to go ahead and put it out there. I feel like what they've basically done is taken $2 million that's rightfully, owed to the school system to pad their general budget to make themselves look better with the 1 cent tax decrease that they've given. That might be a rather political statement, but I can't see it any other way, especially when there was absolutely no discussion before that vote to explain otherwise, to explain exactly what it was that they had concerns with. I look at this note here about, exactly what some of that money was going to go towards, and, $260,000 and some change was for personnel to expand behavioral health sciences. Were there county commissioners that had an issue with that? I'd sure love to know it. How about 500, is that a 5, might be a 6, $641,000 for sustaining operations such as graduation initiative. Do any of the commissioners have a problem with that? How about math investigations? For what I'm seeing, we might actually need to expand that into some of our county commissioners' lesson plans. And then how about utility cost increases? They have a problem with that? Maybe they can advocate for a little rate decrease from Duke Energy.
It is my understanding also that we are to make a formal request.
That is correct.
Listing the items specifically that we plan to spend that money on.
Which I believe we actually already did.
Exactly.
So basically, we're reinventing the wheel. And it concerns me because what I've always tried to do is to work smarter and not harder. And I personally do not like a group of 7 members that feel otherwise. That may be how they operate. You know, maybe they like to repeat things, but I feel very strongly that we've already done that once. We've done a great job at it. They had plenty of time to ask their questions. They had time to ask their questions during that work session. They had time to ask those questions right up until the time of that vote. So,
Madam Chair, it seems like there's sort of two separate issues that are before us. One is we have a continuation budget, which we have to pass in some form in order to continue operating as a school system
Exactly.
next week. And it doesn't, unless we want to propose major changes to this, we have to have a budget to continue.
Yes.
So that's one issue. And then there's a separate issue of the money that was set aside into fund balance and how do we access that? And it seems to me that we had laid out very clearly what the increase was going to be spent on, and there was no fluff in that budget. We had explained to them that there was no fluff in that budget and that these are the necessary items that we need in order to continue to provide excellent education to our students. And it seems to me that what we need to do is, as soon as possible, make a formal presentation back to them, providing them the information that we have already given them of exactly what we need and why we need it, and so that they can say yay or nay on the front end of the year, and we can figure out what we're going to do.
And would your feeling be that that would be in July?
Well, so far, we don't even know from them how we're supposed to go about this. So
Exactly.
as soon as they say, this is how you go about it, I think we need to be ready to give them back the information that we've already given them once and explain it in a way that hopefully they can understand why this is necessary and let them know why we need it.
So it would be your feeling that Dr. Baldwin should get in touch with whomever it is, George Wood, is that his name?
Mr. Wood, the new
Yes.
manager. Mhm.
And ask him to provide us in writing directions on how we are to proceed. You're shaking your head, yes, you think that's what we should do?
That's the logical step. I do think back to Mrs. Frisbee, though, I do think we need to realize that, and we said this over and over and over, the state budget and actual figures from the state budget, interpretations of the state budget through DPI is time consuming. We have yet to actually even received, am I correct?
We have
The
not
first official notification from the Department of Public Instruction regarding the state budget. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yes, and until we have those figures, the reality of making any type of presentation to anyone from a public standpoint, I think, is a very questionable step in terms of, because we have always maintained transparency in this school system.
So is there a big enough window of time then between when we hear from the state? Because Mr. Bryant's right, we can't have a final budget if we do not know how much money we're working with. And until we get a yes or no from them about that money that they've put in their fund balance, we don't know whether we have access to it or not. So is there enough time between when we get the information from the state and when we vote on our final budget that we can make that presentation back to the county and know how much we're working with?
I know I asked Ms. Frisbee to do some calculations and projections to the best of her ability with the existing figures that we do have, and I think, and correct me, these are very basic key components to the discussion that we're having, and it's primarily about salary and benefits. That takes precedence over, as again, I think we've heard this over and over. 85+% of our budget is tied into some type of human resources with salary and benefits. 712 locally funded positions that are impacted by this current situation. We were allotted $1,116,068. That's what I heard from at the commissioners' meeting. We've not yet received anything in writing from them, but that has been made public, so that was a public commitment. And if I'm correct, based on the projections, in order to cover the salary and benefit costs for those 712 locally funded positions, we need approximately a total of $2.1 million to cover. We have received $1.1 million. So in order to, as Mr. Bryant said, in order to say with assuredness that the salary and the benefits will be covered, then we need an additional $1 million of that 1.56 that has been placed in fund balance. That is the immediate priority in order to be able to say over the entire 2018-2019 school year that those salaries and benefits will be covered as similar to state employees for those 712 locally funded positions. Is that correct, Ms. Frisbee?
Is absolutely correct.
So that 1 million is then the minimum of what we would need in order to cover those expenses. but there may-
Yes, ma'am. I think I know where you're going with that, Ms. McMahon. And in order, the funding that we currently have allotted to us that's been publicly committed will carry us through committing those salary and benefit funds to our local employees through December. Correct, Ms. Frisbee?
That's correct.
Just through December.
Yes.
So, the concern for me is the conversations I had with 3 individual commissioners, and then how, from a budget standpoint, it works for you and your staff. So I have a couple other questions. When do, from a procedural or operational perspective, for state-funded employees, whatever the raise is, when do those raises kick in and how are they paid? When do they begin to show up on a paycheck?
The raises are effective July 1st, but we probably will not implement those until August or September, just because we have to have time to lay all that out. And, we haven't received any of our state allotments, so they will not be implemented in July.
So will a 12-month employee that's not implemented in July, their first check will cover 2 months, is that right? In terms of raise?
Right, whenever we implement
Whenever
the
it's
raise,
implemented,
it will
the
be,
raise will be implemented there in
retro.
one check.
Yes, yes.
So how does, from an operational standpoint and from an accounting perspective and from a CAFR at the end of the year, let's just say that they want us to do this on a monthly basis, okay? We figure out whatever the amount is, divide it by 10 months or 9 months or 8 months or 12 months or however they want us to do, however the county wants us to do it. What does that do? How does that impact you and your staff in terms of what will or won't have to be done? And is it sound from an accounting perspective, from a budgeting standpoint and from where you sit? How many questions are you going to have to answer and explain to the auditors at the end of the next year when they come in and sit down with you?
A lot. So depending on how so our appropriations come monthly and once a month for 12 months. They come at the end of the month. So we will start getting that 1.1 million divided by 12 months, ever how much that is, immediately in addition to the existing amount.
From the state?
No, local.
No, from local.
County.
From the county. The state, we have to order that money, but that's different. So not knowing and having to go and ask for that every time is going to be a challenge because, those numbers, it's just going to be hard and to make it all work. And then I worry about a cash flow situation as well. So, and I'm still trying to process how we would even reflect this on our
On the books.
budget
How are you gonna
resolution
show it
and on the books.
Yeah.
But once they release the money, if they do, then it shouldn't be an issue. They should divide it over, whenever they decide to do that, hopefully it will be divided over the remaining months in the fiscal year and we won't have to ask for it anymore.
And if they said to us, okay, we need you to do it 8 times, 10 times, 12 times, whatever, something more than one, from an accounting perspective, from a budgeting perspective, would you then consider all of those funds to be encumbered and you can count on them? Or are you only going to be able to count on the encumbered amount for whatever the time frame is that you're receiving it and getting it?
Well, if they release the money, but we still, and they divide it over the months, then we could go ahead and count it on the books as part of the appropriation. But if we have to go back every time and ask, and that amount be different, then I'm not real sure how we would have to reflect that,
Or how you could plan.
how we could plan.
And
Yeah,
maybe-
it's going to be a real challenge to plan contingent on how we have to access the money.
And do you, and maybe this applies to the county as well, when you look at our fund balance, do you have to interact with those funds in a different manner than you do with the rest of our budget? In terms of how you use it, when you transfer it, how you get it? Because we've not dealt with this, and so I'm worried, and maybe Mr. Shatley can help us. What's the county's function going to be in terms of taking money? Because this is not money that's sitting aside in the budget, it's sitting in the fund balance, which is a totally separate entity. We deal with these kind of things all the time from the state with Fund 8 and all the different funds, and so my worry is, and it may not be anything we can do today, but we need to have a conversation in my mind. Is there anything there we should be talking to them about, thinking about, as you understand financing and budgets and those types of things?
I certainly think that, I think the county's got to understand the difficulty that this puts you in from your own budgeting process.
You think they do understand
No,
this?
I think you got to make sure they understand.
Okay.
Right? And because this has put you in a position where, is it you're just going to give it to us? Is this something where you just need to hold in your fund balance? Because they have a statutory requirement to maintain a certain level of a fund balance, whereas you do not. Is this something that you just need to hold on to for a while, and we can use our own cash flow to take care of this issue until the end of the fiscal year or middle of the fiscal year or whenever? Or is this something that the county may not provide us? Because if you're not going to provide it to us,
We need to plan.
Right.
we've got significant issues.
Absolutely.
Which is why I think we need to ask for it as early in the school year as we can, as we have enough information to do so.
And my fear with all of that, and I asked the question to say this, when a commissioner tells me that the money is there, all we have to do is ask for it, and if you need more, just tell us and we'll get you more, and then says that we're having to count it as part of our fund balance to stay above the 15% level that statute says we have to stay above, and that's why we took it, so that we can have the money to stay above the 15%. They can't do both. If they then give us the money and drop below the 15%, they're not staying above it. Right. If they've got to stay above the 15%, then they got to keep the money.
And I'd like to
generate some
point,
money from somewhere else.
At least until the time that they have revenue come in.
and I'd like to point out that that conversation wasn't even part of their discussion. Again, there was absolutely no discussion prior to that vote. So nothing publicly was said as to the why or the how.
My fear is, I'm not comfortable that we're going to have the money.
Mm-hmm.
Not comfortable that we're going to have the money. And 700-plus people,
Actually, more people, it's 712 full-time equivalents. So,
so we got more real bodies.
more bodies, but that's the number of FTEs.
Do you want to speak, Dr. Baldwin?
Are we better off starting
Okay.
and then having to stop?
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine if one of those folks come November, suddenly we got to drop their pay because we didn't get a request? And I know this is worst-case scenario, but this is the most important thing we do is budgeting, where we sit on this board. And we can't, even if we made a bad decision on what we wanted to do with some money, knowing the money we had is going to be there, we're less likely, in my mind, to make a mistake or have a problem than to make a decision on money we're not sure is going to be there. And that's the dilemma for me.
That's
And I
like-
can see it on your face, it's your dilemma.
It is my dilemma.
I know it's Dr. Baldwin's and everybody on this board's, so I've danced around the bush and hadn't really gotten anything done here. What do? Now, we can ask, but we can't plan. That's my problem. I'm pragmatic, problems come up, I want to figure them out, move on, let's get a solution, move on. We can't do that with this. We cannot plan for those people.
Like
And
planning to
that's-
pay your mortgage on the, thought that you're going to win a scratch ticket,
Yeah.
you know?
So I think I've exhausted my questions.
Didn't have as many as I thought he'd have.
And again, this would have been a great time for them to explain themselves in the middle of that meeting prior to a vote, and maybe some of these questions would have been answered at that time.
I don't think they, as commissioners, I don't think they know the answer. I don't think it went that far because there wasn't any conversation with the folks that were affected. And when you don't do that, and then don't even talk amongst yourself when the amendment's made, there's no discussion at the table. It wouldn't take us long if we operated like that to have problems. And the folks sitting out here wouldn't be very happy with us,
And rightfully so.
rightfully so. Rightfully so.
You ready? I'm going to recognize Dr. Baldwin.
Just one statement, because I want to say this publicly. I'm going to just put this out as a warning and a concern, and it's something that we've talked about on numerous occasions when the discussion has gone to fund balance. Fund balance is not in place to handle recurring costs.
Right.
So when we discuss in the same breath salaries and benefits for employees with the use of fund balance, I think we're stepping into some very murky waters. Because again, those salaries and benefits are of a recurring nature. The reason why I hear fund balance attached to cash flow is because the cash is flowing in and out. We are buying time to allow that flow to come to our advantage. But when we look at fund balance for anything beyond a one-time payout in an emergency, that's what fund balance is there for, then I think, again, we're stepping into some areas that, to my experience as a superintendent with this board, we've never gone. We've been very cognizant of the appropriate use for fund balance. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes. Other comments or questions from the board?
Well, I would like to ask Mr. Shatley and possibly Dr. Baldwin, the fund balance that we had generated was due to prudent management and savings over a long period of time, year to year. And I guess I'm concerned that, does the county have the right to come in and sweep that account and take possession of that money? That money had been allocated to the schools. And what it sounded like to me is they have swept the account, or at least a large portion of the account. And just like Dr. Baldwin said, even my short time on the board, I know that there have been a couple of occasions where non-funded mandates come down from Raleigh, and everybody's scrambling trying to find a way to pay for them, and we utilize fund balance to meet those things. Now you're taking and you're basically just eroding your fund balance in one fell swoop to do what Dr. Baldwin mentioned, and that's helping to cover ongoing recurring costs. And we don't have a recurring fund balance. That's rainy day money.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess my question is, do they have that power to do that?
They don't necessarily have statutory authority to use your fund balance. I mean, and they, this $1.5 million some dollars is what they're putting in their fund balance. They do have the ability to do that. I mean, the Fiscal Control Act is pretty broad and gives the county a lot of authority in how it manages its allocation to the local school district. There is a mechanism inside of the Fiscal Control Act, or the Budget Fiscal Control Act, that allows local schools to contest the county, basically arguing over whether or not the county is sufficiently funding the operations of the school districts with local tax revenues. So there is that mechanism. I don't remember the time of 15 years that I've been here that this board has ever utilized that mechanism. But
However, others in the state have.
correct, others in the state have. But specifically to answer your question, I mean, the county does not have the ability to take funds out of yours, as in the board's or the district's fund balance.
Okay.
Well, they do in one regard. And this has been the concern of mine for a couple of years now, since they've started asking a lot of questions about our fund balance. And no matter what we've showed it to them on paper, no matter how we've explained it to them, they've not seemed to be able to understand that much of that money, just like you're talking about, Max, is encumbered, and it is recurring, and it is balancing a budget of recurring funds, and it's not just money that is sitting there. And
In our house.
in our house. So if they don't understand that and they think the money is sitting there, and they don't have a statutory means to go after it and force it to be part of our budget, the one way that one could do this, and I don't think this is what they've done, but the one way one could do that is if you reduced new monies, and the math that I did, between the two withholdings, 518,000, 1.5 million, that's 2,088,000. Our request for continuation money for salary, benefits, et cetera, was 2.3 million. That's 91% of that funding, of what we requested. Not 91% of the total request, but 91% of what was our request for continuation for people, 712 FTEs, more than that, real bodies, that are currently working for Buncombe County Schools. They are recurring people. It's recurring funds. And if we get into that type of situation, then we're so tight as it is financially. We're not tight. We're tight in terms of stretching every dollar that we can in terms of personnel and that type of thing. The next thing that happens to you at this seat, at this board, is you got to start talking about eliminating things. And that's my fear. It's not, we'll work through this, we'll figure this out, but the next two steps, the 2, 3, 4 steps down the road are not very encouraging to me, based upon this particular set of cards that were dealt a few weeks ago from the commissioners in the county of Buncombe. And that's my concern. There's an immediate concern, but more so, what's next? Because now the toothpaste is out of the tube, and you ain't putting it back in. You can't do it. And that's my concern, is where does this go next? And I didn't have that big a concern when it happened that night, but my conversations with commissioners since has given me greater cause for pause, because I just feel like they think they're counting it and they're still going to give it to us, and I don't see how you count it as fund balance and then give it away. At the end of the year, you're going to have to make some accounting come June 30th that they've maintained 15%, which state statute requires. And if the money goes out the door and you're not anticipating those funds coming in the budget, which it doesn't appear that they are, I just don't know how they're going to make that work and how we're going to make it work.
I think we all understand your concern, Pat, and I will say for the board that we appreciate you articulating these concerns so clearly. I've had an opportunity to talk to 2 or 3 of the commissioners, and it troubles me that the trust level from the commission to this board, I think, has been injured.
And we haven't earned that. We have
No.
not earned that.
No, not at all, because we played fair.
We've
We
not earned
asked for what we needed, which has been the understanding, long-time understanding between the school board and the commissioners. And for them to do this to the school system and to the students in this county is unconscionable. So while Ms. Frisbee's standing up here, what do we do?
May I ask her one more question?
You can
Yeah,
ask
change the
anything
subject
you
while everybody thinks. Capital Outlay Fund on page 2 of, where is it, page 2? No, page,
The last page?
yeah, the last page of, just above your signature, the Capital Outlay Fund, there's an amount there, 100%, and I understand that. Is that just Article 39, or is that 39 and 4042?
That's everything.
That's all of it? Okay.
We done okay?
Thought it was, but I just wanted to confirm that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm discussing with the attorney here. This board's between a rock and a hard place. And as I understand it, we have to pass this budget, or everybody goes home, and I mean, everybody goes home, and we can't open the doors again until we have a budget. So,
Madam Chair, may I just say that that's the reason that I'll be voting for this budget, even though I share Pat's very grave concerns. And in terms of your comments about the trust being undermined between the county commissioners and the school board, I believe that the trust has very much obviously been undermined in the county, and that's been sort of sloughed off onto us, which is completely unfair. And yet, our responsibility is to the students and the teachers in our classrooms, and therefore, I personally commit to do everything that I can do individually and as a board member to work on rebuilding that trust and improving the communication with the commissioners, but I will be voting for this budget.
thank you. Anybody else want to speak?
I just have a question about, for Ms. Frisbee, about the, sorry, I think I'm going to have to get my eyes checked. I cannot.
Lost her place.
The Federal Grants Fund, that's what it is. So can you explain the carryover part of that, or just this in general? I was struggling with it a little bit.
So when we presented our first budget resolution to the board in May, because we had to get it to the county by May 15th, we didn't have a lot of these planning allotments. So what you saw on the May document is different. This document shows different. So we have since received the planning allotments for these particular PRCs that are listed on here. And then the estimated carryover is what will help us operate through July through September, because the federal fiscal year runs October through September.
So those funds are October to September funds, the carryover?
The carryover for most. Some of them carry over longer, but this is what we will operate on until the official allotments are received in October and thereafter.
Okay.
I have a question for the attorney, and I understand the need for not closing our doors, but where do we stand legally to require that they come to a decision within a certain period of time as to exactly how we're supposed to ask for this money? Can we ask that they do this in 2 weeks? Can we ask that it be done within a month, their next commission meeting?
I think that the board can ask them at any point in time to allocate the funds, or allocate it at least spread out over the normal 12 months, how you receive your allocation. It didn't appear to me that they made any indication of when you could come back and ask for the money. As you mentioned earlier, they just indicated that you would come back and make a formal request for the funds. Do you have the ability to, or let me put it this way, do you have the ability to go to them and require them to do something? No, you do not. The only thing that you could really use in your toolkit here is, there is the dispute resolution process, which requires both boards to get together and sit down. That's the first step of that process in a mediation with the mediator. And this bill is actually, I was just looking at the brand-new version. It's been
Yes.
amended. It was amended 2 days ago. So I've not completely gone through the new amended version yet, but mediation is still the first step in the process. So that's always an option to the board, if that's what the board wants to do. It does have certain time requirements. I think you've got to request it within 7 days of the county adopting their budget. However, I think potentially some conversations between the interim county manager and the superintendent would be appropriate to attempt to resolve and figure out a way through this that would allow you to appropriately budget for the upcoming year, to make sure that you are able to have access to those funds in a meaningful way at a meaningful time, to ensure that you can continue to employ those 712 full-time equivalents.
And yet we are asked to vote for this budget today. And
You can
Well, this
vote
is a
no-
continuing resolution.
This is an interim budget, so
This is
just-
this is not your 2018-19 budget. This is a continuing resolution to ensure that as of July 1, you can keep the doors open and folks in the audience can continue to come to work and those sorts of things.
Personally, I think, Ms. Churchill, that I think that Dr. Baldwin and Mr. Wood having a conversation is the first step. And I would encourage Dr. Baldwin, and I'm sure all of us would, to do that as quickly as possible. But I also think it's prudent for us to wait until after the state budget comes out and we actually see what we have and what we don't have. It seems to me that our request at that juncture would be firmer than us saying, well, we don't have the state budget yet, but we know we're going to need these funds. And so since we're in this position of distrust, I would prefer that we move cautiously after the state budget comes. And they keep talking about leaving town. I'm not real sure when that's going to happen, but after they leave town, that would be the General Assembly. It's usually about 2 weeks after they leave town that we can actually figure out what it says. Is that correct?
We usually get our allotments within 2 weeks after they adjourn.
so the earliest that we could maybe expect to understand what it is we will be receiving from the state would be like August,
If they leave town.
if they leave town.
They're supposed to leave town tomorrow, I think, aren't they?
Yeah. We're all hopeful that they're going to hear somebody calling their name and they go home. But we don't know.
But, Madam Chair, just for clarification, is that right? I mean, is that going to work? Normally, when we're sitting, so we've never done this before, but
No.
we're never waiting at this point in time to know what the county of Buncombe's allocated to us, not in the past. Do we have to have the final state numbers to know if this request of $1,569,409 is going to be needed for those 712 FTEs we've got?
Well, again, preliminary projections show that we need 2.1 million just for the salaries and benefits for those 712 FTEs.
But I think your
So,
question.
But this interim budget will allow us to continue operation, and then we start preparing our original official budget resolution that we bring back to the board in August or September. So we need the time to get all of that.
The one thing final allotments will provide you is a finite number on raises to
Right.
state-paid staff, increase in benefit costs to state-paid staff, and the amount of allocation that a local school board has got to put forward to the retirement benefits of state-paid staff.
Right.
And then having those numbers will then allow you to know exactly what it was going to
Right.
cost for your 712 locally paid positions.
But we know we need at least 2.1 million.
And that's, like I said,
We're a
that's a
million
preliminary
short.
projection.
I would
and that's-
encourage this board, I
so-
would encourage Madam Chair, I would encourage the Vice Chair, and I would encourage Dr. Baldwin to formally request that money on Monday or Tuesday or Thursday, as sooner rather than later. I'd rather them tell us we need those finite numbers, and let's begin the process. And I think it needs to be done in formal manner in writing to request that with some bullet points or some notation that backs up the dilemma that this puts us in. And maybe there's some input from Ms. Frisbee on that in writing. Not a 4 or 5 page diatribe, but something that explains to them what this does and how this impacts us and where our concerns are. And we're looking for a partnership on this with you, county, but we need sooner rather than later direction, and we need it formally. Now, that's just one guy's thoughts, but I think it ought to be a formal request. Request is probably the wrong term. Formal written communication to begin the process sooner rather than later. I think waiting until August is a mistake. You're going to begin to hear more and more conversation about this. I don't know how many, but there'll be some folks who watch the conversation we've had today that's being recorded. You're going to have some, and I think if we wait, we're making, from a prudent standpoint, a mistake. Even if we start and we don't get an answer, and the answer is, we need you to wait until you've got your final state numbers, I still think we're better off if we start formally the process as soon as is possible.
Okay.
We need to get a process.
Okay, would it be amenable to the board if we approve the interim budget and then we discuss what Pat has given us? Would that be?
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that we need necessarily a formal vote by acclamation or a thumbs up to you if the board's in agreement. I'm not looking for something there. I'm comfortable. I'm going to support passing the interim budget. I think this is a conversation we needed to have. We can't close the doors. Right? I mean, we can't do that. That's cutting up our nose to spite our face. Can't do that. I'm prepared to vote for that, but I just think we need to formally move forward sooner rather than later from chair and superintendent, chair, vice chair, superintendent. I don't know what the necessary step should be, but I do think it needs to be a formal written request that would then necessitate a formal written answer. And then it's not me talking to a commissioner, it's not us hearing it at the meeting, it's not you, it's not somebody else. We know what the marching orders are, and we've got it in writing, and this is what we need to do so that we can do it as quickly as possible so that Ms. Frisbee and her staff can get it in place, and we don't add to the workload.
Sure.
Clarifying question. Are you suggesting that we make a formal request for the 2.1 million or for funds, or just a formal request that they tell us what the process will be and how we move forward?
I think we request the dollars, but I'll defer to the group that gets together, Vice Chair, Madam Chair, and Dr. Baldwin. I'll defer, that's why you're there, I'll defer to what you think is best. But I think it needs to, whatever we do needs to start sooner rather than later. This vote was on, what was the date of the vote? June. What was the date? Anybody remember? June 9th?
June
No,
19th.
June 9th.
It's the 19th when the
June
county.
19th, that's right, because it was Caitlin's birthday, because I had to leave early and go to birthday dinner. Yes, June 19th. Today is the 28th?
Right. Yes.
Receive any communication from the county. And they've heard from us.
Yes, they've heard from us. Okay.
They've not heard from us in a formal manner, and I
Right.
just think it needs to be that way.
Okay, I'm having a little bit of trouble here because I hear you say formal, and I hear, to me, that...
In writing.
Okay, in writing. So for us, in my mind, to do something formal, we probably need to do a motion or a directive or whatever we're going to call that, so Dr. Baldwin can go to Mr. Wood and say, my board has instructed me to whatever.
Can we go ahead and vote on this interim budget first?
That's what I was trying to get out. Let's vote on the interim budget, and then let's talk about what we're doing. Thank you very much. I believe the question's been called. All those in favor of the interim budget, please let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed. Thank you very much, Board and Ms. Frisbee.
You're welcome. Thank you.
May you have a wonderful 4th of July.
To answer your question, Madam Chair, One thing that I think you all need to come to consensus on, whether you vote on it or not, I don't see any problem with having a vote to provide the superintendent and chair, or chair and vice chair, some directives on how to proceed, or authorized to proceed on behalf of the board. But I do think what you do, it needs to be clear to those folks of what you're asking them to do, and make sure that they have an understanding of what that ask is.
So I agree. So would it be amenable to the board when we go into closed session that we ask some of these knowledgeable people that are in this room to give us an idea of what we'd like to say?
This would not be a closed session topic other than for seeking legal advice.
No, I was just going to say they could do it during closed session, and then we could,
Who could do it during closed session?
our employees.
Oh, they could talk while you're in
Yeah.
closed? Yeah. So they can certainly talk with each other while
Well,
you're
I'm
in closed
glad.
session, absolutely. I'm sorry, I thought you meant provide advice to the board.
I'm
while in
glad
closed
you
session.
will allow our employees to speak. So if it's okay with you guys, we can let them get together and decide kind of what they feel like we would need. Then when we come back into open session at the end of this, then we can read what you have said and see if it covers the subject. How about that? Is that okay with you guys? Do you object?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think this falls in our laps as a board.
Well, they've heard us, and
I just think this is what we're, it's funny to listen to conversations about pay. This is what we're paid to do
yeah,
as
all
elected officials.
$250.
I think the direction should come from us. I'm comfortable with it being you and Dr. Baldwin, or you and the Vice Chair and Dr. Baldwin sitting down and putting a plan together and doing something. The emphasis for me is written request, written process, beginning in writing, and as soon as possible. That's where I'm at.
I can see that. Would you guys feel the same way? I got a yes from Max and Amy's.
And Madam Chair, I feel like where
Struggling
we
with my
are right now
conservative
is that
values right
we
now.
do need to know what the process is.
Yes.
And I agree with Dr. Baldwin that until we have more firm budget numbers from the state and can really clearly justify to them why this is needed, since the 2.1 million is still a little bit of an estimate, I don't feel like I personally am comfortable going to them with numbers until we have our hard and fast budget numbers from the state. But I do agree with Pat that we need to do something in writing soon to ask them what the process should be.
So the point of all this is to ask Dr. Baldwin to get in touch with Mr. Wood and tell him that we want to talk.
If I may, I think the other advantage of putting this in writing and taking that step is creating documentation that we were aware of this the moment we saw what they were doing and how it was potentially could impact us. And so if we get down the road 6 months, 8 months, whatever, into next year, and this whole thing plays out and we still don't know and we're coming up short, we can certainly point back. And I think maybe this may not need to be just a single episode of a single correspondence or letter. I think if it causes this much heartburn among this board, I think that needs to be communicated, and we need to seek resolution of some sort.
So when Dr. Baldwin calls Mr. Wood to have a verbal interaction, he could also follow it up with an email and start an email
I certainly think that would be
thread
appropriate.
to validate and verify that that's where we've been. Okay, it seems to me that we're all on the same page. Any objection to moving on? Then we're on the consent agenda, if I'm doing this correctly. And on the consent agenda, we have policies for the second reading, which are policies 1320, 3560, Title I Parent Family Engagement, 2670 Business Advisory Council, 3110 Innovation in Curriculum and Instruction, 7510 Leave, 7520 Family Medical Leave, 7630 non-licensed certified employee compensation. As I understand it, these, the changes that are made in these policies are changes that are suggested by the School Board Association, and they're just small changes, small, sometimes clerical changes. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you. Could I get a second? Thank you. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Policies for first readings, 3450 concerning class ranking, 3400R evaluation and student progress, and that's for information. I'd entertain a motion now to go into closed session for the purposes that our attorney is going to read.
Sure, under subsection A1, for the disclosure of privileged confidential information under North Carolina General Statute 115C 319 through 321, and under Family Education Rights Privacy Act, as well under A3, discuss matters protected by the attorney-client privilege, and under subsection A6 to discuss performance and conditions of employment for a public officer.
He did not read that.
No, he didn't. He has
You know how many
committed.
times I say that?
Thank you. Could I get a motion to adjourn to closed session?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We will return here upon completion of closed session. For all those of you that are waiting with bated breath. We are here to report from closed session that the personnel report has been presented, and I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
And could I get a second?
Second.
Well, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, now I would need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. I hope y'all celebrate the 4th of July and enjoy it to the hilt.